Welcome to the sixth and last part of Redefining Normal, Textual and Visual Rhetoric of Women with Disabilities, my project on the intersectionality and representation of female bodies with disabilities in the forms of textual and visual rhetoric of still image advertising. If you're new here and don't know what I'm talking about, I suggest that you watch the other 5 videos first, unless you like to listen to the end of the story first. My name is Sincavage, and I'm a senior writing and linguistics major at Georgia Southern University with a concentration in rhetoric and composition and a minor in economics. This video is going to wrap up everything that we've been theorizing and analyzing, and then we'll look towards the future of disability representation of female bodies. This is everything that we've been working towards, and I'm so thankful that you've come on this journey with me. Remember how important this research is. The Center for Disease Control reported in a press release that 61 million Americans have a disability that impacts major life activities. I can't imagine 61 million of anything, let alone individuals that face different challenges and discrimination just because their bodies are different. And Cornell University reports that every year that you remain on this earth, the likelihood of becoming disabled increases. So what we talk about and see today directly affects either you or someone you know. And if it doesn't right now, it definitely will in the future. This means that there's no definite separation between disabled or abled, even though some people tend to make this distinction. These states exist on a continuum, and the choices that we make in regards to representing disability directly affect us all and how disability is considered in our society. It is about what is present and not present, shown but not shown, and this encompasses both images as well as text. But how do we define disability? What do we say about it? In the second video, we answered these questions. The textual rhetoric and definitions attached to people with disabilities have changed over time, inevitably becoming negative because of this attachment. Words like retardation, handicapped, and invalid were all positive at one point, but became negative because of the deep connection to what society defines as the normal body. Opinions of disability are not created solely on the terms, but also by other words and phrases used to describe the person. This use of language is not limited to text. How we speak about disability in our everyday lives is dependent both on the person's ability as well as their other identities. Remember Mama Cox, a Haitian American model, and Bethany Hamilton, a white surfer, are both women who lost limbs in adolescence, but were described and defined differently. Hamilton was described in a headline as surfer, shark attack survivor, Bethany Hamilton to attend premiere of Unstoppable. She's a survivor, she's successful, and the headline focuses on these things instead of her disability. While Cox was described as amputee woman who was given 3 weeks to live becomes famous fashion blogger. It seems that her disability is the only thing that matters because it was placed even before the word woman. Cox was defined by her disability and not the fight that she lost her limb to, unlike Hamilton. This difference and distinction allows us to see that some people can be more normal than others, even if they have similar identities. The textual rhetoric attached to disability affects how we see disability. If we use negative words like retardation or handicap, we think negatively about disability. By being aware of the effects and indications of our language, we can change how we personally consider and how our society considers disability and the bodies attached to it. Along with textual rhetoric, representation in images affects how we see or consider what it means to be disabled. Visual rhetoric allows us to look at these images in a way to derive meaning about the surrounding culture. In the third video, we saw that the history of visual representation of disability is long and comes in various forms, but I focused on advertising and show cards for sideshow performers and charity advertisements. Remember Frances O'Connor, known as the Living Venus de Milo, and Pam Henry, featured in the March of Dimes campaign. O'Connor's example showed overt sexualization and exploitation of the pity that is typically derived from disability in the public sphere. O'Connor was portrayed in a sexualized way because of the way her employer and audiences viewed her disabilities. She was also defined by her acts under both her stage name as the Living Venus de Milo and the Algie Barnes and Sells Flotto Combined Circus. Through this, she lost her personhood. Henry also inspired pity in her audience. People who saw her in her poster wanted her to have new hope, to be able to walk, to be cured. Only they could help her. While Henry is depicted as powerless and needing the help of someone else, O'Connor can be seen as independent as she daintily sips her tea without aid. Both of these females are characterized and simplified by their appearances and their portrayed disabilities in order to be exploited. This exploitation created simplistic narratives of what it means to be disabled. Disability continues to be exploited in this way in order to get more money, making it a deeply ingrained aspect of representation in our society. Rather than normalizing disability, representation has sought to keep disability abnormal so that we can continue to abuse these bodies for profit. We saw a different kind of abuse and exploitation of bodies with disabilities through our analysis of athletic and activewear in the fourth video. The companies of Nike, Asos, and Target employed Paralympic athletes to model their merchandise and create an image for their companies. April Holmes, Chloe Ball-Hopkins, and Robin Lambert are all talented and accomplished athletes that speak out for proper representation of bodies with disabilities. In these advertisements, Holmes and Lambert were used to promote the idea of brand inclusivity by putting these bodies apart and separating them compositionally. There was a definitive focus on the disability rather than the products. This is not normalization, but the perpetuation of the abnormal and its separateness. Ball-Hopkins, on the other hand, shines in her ad. She is the prime focus, and rather than being a separate aspect of the advertisement, the image is holistic and includes her. She looks accepted, happy, and normal. Nike and Target did not use these women accurately and did not represent them as humans rather than tokens. By using composition and color blocking, the focus is on the disability rather than the women themselves. But there is a more effective way to represent bodies with disabilities, and Asos did it. We also saw accurate representation in the swimwear lingerie section in the fifth video. The brands Aerie and Chromat both use models with disabilities for their summer 2018 campaigns. They both have good histories with efforts at representation and normalization, but the execution was very different. Remember, just because a company represents disability, it does not mean that it is a positive representation. One of the major points of this project is to learn how to see, to analyze, and to expect more, as well as learning about how rhetoric works. Looking back at Aerie, again, it seems representative. There are models with disabilities, and they're right next to models without disabilities. So it looks like good representation, but the bodies are just as contained and separate, indicating no effort to make it normal or typical, but every effort to create a sense of inclusivity. Chromat, on the other hand, puts models with disabilities into spaces that were previously reserved for models without disabilities. By having Mama Cox wear a swimsuit in a group of models, Chromat is normalizing the female body in all forms. This created an aesthetic value to the images that isn't present in the Aerie ads. By having the women interact and connect, the image itself is more cohesive than just women all lined up. The importance of representation and disability in lingerie and swimwear is that these are specifically two clothing types that are hidden or preserved for the perfect bodies. Just pick up a magazine or watch the Victoria's Secret fashion show, and you can easily see what these bodies are supposed to look like. Aerie and Chromat are both working to redefine that, although one better than the other. But it's time we expect more. It's time that we expect effective representation in 2019 for a fifth of all people, where the bodies with disabilities are normalized and integrated rather than exploited. One way to do that is through self-representation. Sins Invalid is a performance project that celebrates artists with disabilities, allowing them to be sexualized and beautified on their own terms, an experience called Crip Beauty. You can find the link to the project in the description. The project was founded by Patricia Byrne and Leroy Moore. Byrne still works with the project and is a Japanese Haitian queer disabled woman. Her identities provide grounding for her work, creating liberated zones for marginalized voices, for people that society considers abnormal and negative. All bodies are accepted and celebrated outside of the realm of normalcy. An example of this performance is that of Nomi Lamb, a plus-sized amputee that identifies as female. I couldn't find pictures of this exact performance, but here is Nomi Lamb for reference. One of her performances consists of her sitting naked against a pink background and holding a large piece of beige lace in front of her body. She sways back and forth as she sings about staying open to the world before she finally drops the lace, showing her large, non-normative nude body for all to see. Through the multiple intersections of being disabled, overweight, and female, society has tried to shame her into covering her body that doesn't fit into our normal. But through performance, Lamb is able to embrace what she is taught to hide, regardless of normativity or non-normativity. The purpose is for those with disabilities to regain agency through deciding how they will represent themselves, rather than waiting for others to choose how they will be represented. Thus, positive representation of disabled female bodies is possible in our current society. Shada Cafe, a lecturer at California State Polytechnic University, explains that Crip Beauty fractures the ableist assumption that beauty is reserved for the non-disabled body-mind. It urges that there is a pleasure and eroticism in bearing witness to disability, in cultivating a space where body minds that are traditionally forced into invisibility can gather together. Body mind is a term used to reference the whole person because the body and mind are inseparable. Just like Chromat and Asos were breaking the assumption that only able bodies can be used for advertising clothing, Sins Invalid is crushing the assumption that only able bodies can be sexy, erotic, and visible. But the key distinction here is that these people are representing themselves. They are choosing. It's not like the freak show where Frances O'Connor was hired because she was beautiful in the eyes of society and also disabled. These performers are queer, people of color, different body sizes, different abilities, all bodies that society has decided are not the norm for beautiful, attractive, or worthy of praise. But we know that what's normal isn't what's representative, and Sins Invalid is trying to prove that. Another form of important self-representation is through the use of social media, specifically Instagram. As you might have noticed, I've cited several forms of social media throughout this project, including Twitter and Instagram. These formats allow people to craft appearances of themselves and share their thoughts and feelings with the world in their communities. Sophia P. Caldera and Sander de Ritter observed that these platforms are even more important for females, reporting that, departing from the one-to-many model of traditional media, Instagram allows ordinary people greater access to the tools of media production, thus potentially democratizing representations. Rather than representing only specific body types or abilities, the social media platform allows users to not only put themselves out there, but also find bodies similar to their own. Just take a second, pause this video, and search #disability on Instagram. Scrolling through, you can see people living their lives. So not only are the people there, but they are being represented properly. Sophia P. Caldera and Sander de Ritter explain, self-representation thus offers an opportunity to avoid misrepresentations that often occur when others are in charge of creating one's image. The goal of these people is not to exploit their disability, but to normalize it and share their experiences. They aren't trying to seem inclusive or create brand loyalty. They are themselves. And I have some great examples of females with disabilities. First is Robin Lambert, at Robin Lambert, who is a Paralympic athlete and model that has brand sponsorships, who we highlighted in the Activewear section. Then Iwa Harapin, at Harapin Story, is a woman with an amputated leg that takes full mirror selfies and loves to post pictures of herself at the gym. And finally, Annie Segarra, at Annie Elaney, a woman who described herself as a queer, disabled Latinx person. By taking pictures and putting them on social media in a space where thousands upon thousands of people can see them and interact with them, these women are working to normalize their bodies far better than the advertisements of Target, Aerie, and Nike. As time goes by, we expect society to improve. We expect for justice to be served, for rights to be given to minority groups, and for representation to be inclusive. Unfortunately, the representation of disability has changed far too little since its creation in the early 20th century, and we need to do better. I started this project because I wanted to bring to light the things that we see, read, and say every day. I wanted to make you aware of the media that you are consuming so that you are now conscious of how you are contributing to societal pressures and power. Angel Dixon assured blog readers that what I have learned is that it's also tricky for the non-disabled people in our society. It can be confronting and confusing for some to see a person functioning in the world in a way that is so different from the way they do. But since we perceive based on our experiences, widening our lens is crucial to give us perspective of new experiences and wider representations of bodies. If you take one thing away from this whole project, this whole argument, let it be that the way that you exist, the way you look, and the way that you move is in no way applicable to every single person on this earth. I did this project about advertisements because, as Stanković et al. Remark, it contributes to the consumer's formation of social identity, frequently influencing both their current attitudes and what they should be. Representations in advertisements dictate how people see and perceive disability. Society will never talk about or treat disability as if it is equal and legitimate until we act like it is legitimate, until we represent it normally.